Hey, this is RockMan. Welcome to the explosive series finale of RockMan Reads a Freakin Book, where DK left off. Today I will be reading chapters 48 through 50 of I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. It's not actually chapter 50, it's called Epilogue, but you get the idea. So let's finish this book, this frickin' book. Chapter 48. This is what it's all been leading to. Mirax's brown eyes blinked open and she began to smile. She reached up with her right hand, grabbed a fistful of my tunic and pulled me back down, covering her mouth with mine. We kissed with the urgency of lost love found. Heart's pain eased. I stroked her hair and she kept me close. Then we both had to come up for air. Pulling back so I could see all of her face, I smiled. Hi. Hi yourself. You're pretty cute. She smiled back up at me, sending a jolt through me from head to toe and back again. Of course, if my husband finds out you kiss me like that, you'll be in big trouble. Luke burst out laughing. Her I like. I kissed her on the tip of the nose. You remember Luke Skywalker, right? I do indeed. Good to see you again, though I could have hoped for better circumstances. Mirax sat up, swung her legs over the edge of the byre, and stretched. I don't even want to know where this rock is. I just want to know you have a plan for getting us off of it. The distant whine of blasters accompanied by Eligos's entry into the detention cell. Oral has cut them off at the stair landing. We better move before they bring up reinforcements. Mirax cocked her head at the Kamasi. A Kamasi? Eligos Akla, trustant of the Kamasi community at Kerlit. I looked at her. He's been taking good care of me. She laughed and threw Eligos a salute. You have my thanks and sympathies. Taking care of him can be quite a chore. Eligos shrugged. Not really. You have him well trained. Still leaves dirty clothes lying about, though, right? I cleared my throat. We can have this discussion later. Any chance we can make it back to the spaceport from here? Eligos shook his head. Not likely. Mirax hefted the blaster carbine I'd left on the byre. Then we go to the top of the big tower. They have a landing pad there. That's how they brought me in after they separated me from the skate. We steal some speeder bikes or a shuttle and make a dash for your ship. Luke nodded. It's a plan. Mirax pointed at the door. Let's move then. The Jedi Master looked at me. Notice any resemblance between her and Mara? I shivered. Now that you mention it. Let's make sure they never get together, okay? Right. From the far end of the corridor, Oral was filling the stairwell with a hail of laser bolts, stippling the wall behind the first landing with little fires. 2 stormtroopers lay tangled on the stairs, and others kept peeking around the edge. They snapped their heads back when Oral fired at them. Stretching out my senses, I could feel a knot of them waiting on the stairs and toward that end of the corridor above us. I smiled. I've got a piece of a plan. Mirax, the blaster, please. I pointed at the ceiling. Eligos, if you can boost me up there. Luke held a hand out. Permit me. With a simple gesture, I rose toward the ceiling as steadily as if standing on a stone platform. I ignited my lightsaber and cored a circle into the ceiling above me, then shoved it out of the way as Luke pushed me all the way up through it. Taking a step forward, I brought the blaster carbine up and lashed the stream of blue energy darts back and forth over the crowd of armor-shelled warriors clogging the corridor's end. Their armor deflected some shots and ablated to lessen the power of others, reducing them from stunning them to something that just dazed the soldiers, but I had such clean shots at them that they were at my mercy. Eligos came up through the hole next and blazed away with his blaster. His blue bolts struck befuddled targets, enveloping them in a collapsing sphere of blue that dropped them easily. Trapped as they were not really a fighting force, just targets waiting to be shot. I scythed my fire over them, and together we finished them off. Oral came up the stairs, but Mirax and Luke took the quicker route to the corridor. Mirax took the blaster back from me, appropriated a power pack from Oral, and kissed him on the cheek. She turned and pointed back away from the stairs. Along here, there's a corridor that goes over to the main building, landing pads on the top. Luke led the way. Need to be careful. The stormtroopers we can pick out with the Force, but the Jedi, they're more difficult. Difficult, that's an understatement. Mirax tossed the blaster's old power pack aside and jammed the new one home. Their leader, this woman they call the Sarai Kar, somehow thinks holding me is preventing her family from being destroyed. When she spoke to me, when she fed me, and I know I was sleeping for a long time between meals, she would speak in past and present and future. She said a Halcyon was her doom or destiny, but wouldn't go into details. It was confusing, but I never thought she was insane. Luke shook his head. She probably didn't understand it any better than you did, or than Corrin did when he lost contact with you. He didn't have the mental framework in place to make it make sense. I'm still not sure I do. No, but neither do the Gen Sarai. Luke frowned. They have training, but it's skewed, and things have been added. It's not an independent Force tradition like the Dathomiri witches, but it's unlike anything else I know of. He shrugged. That's not saying much. You! The shouted words came angry through the speakers in the comm unit at the hallway juncture. Though the speakers in the comm unit at the hallway juncture couldn't quite produce all the outrage they were meant to convey, I glanced to my left and saw a hologram of Tavira standing there, just shy of life-size, her hands on her hips. You were the Jedi at Corcus. I nodded. At your service. Shifting my lightsaber to my left hand, I gestured with my right to Luke and Mirax. I'd like to introduce Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master, and Mirax Tarek, and... But wait. We're on our way up to see you. Introductions are so much nicer in person. How dare you? Oh, I dare. I pointed to the sky. New Republic will be here in no time. The days of the invidious are over. Never. I laughed. By the way, the month's not up, but the answer is no. Arg, when I get my hands on you. In your dreams, dearie. Mirax shot the comm unit. Empire's been dead for years, and still she relies on those limping Imperial threats. When I get my hands on you, get with the times, woman. I like your Mirax a whole bunch, Corrin. Luke smiled, and you're right, she and Mara should never meet. We picked up the pace, racing into the main building, and began working our way up. The staircase that wound around the inside of the building's tall atrium had a thick enough balustrade to provide some cover, of which we took advantage, as did those individuals trying to stop us. Blaster bolts, red and blue, whined and streaked, ricocheted and smoked as they burned into white marble pillars or black wall tiles. The stairs' gradual slope meant they wound around endlessly, it seemed, but was not sufficient to slow us down that much. They didn't have landings per se, so no easy points to defend, and our opponents had to put up with one unbelievably annoying problem. Two of their targets bore these archaic weapons and were swatting blaster bolts out of the air. Luke was even able to redirect his at our enemies, knocking them down or making them break cover long enough for Oral, Eligos, or Mirax to shoot them from a flanking position. As we climbed toward the building's upper reaches, we felt the tremor course through it. A shuttle's going up. Eligos frowned. Tavira must be running. Oral and I exchanged glances. That, or someone else is carrying orders for her. Someone else is off carrying orders for her. I tried to push my senses to see if I could find Tavira in the shuttle or still in the building above us, but I got nothing. Something is blocking me. Luke nodded. Me too. The Gen Sarai. Must be. We pushed on, clearing the last length of corridor, then topped several steps that opened onto the foyer of a grand chamber. This had been the Imperial Governor's audience chamber, and clearly designed to impress. While the space itself was square in construction, the inner design was circular. From the arrangements of the twisted basalt pillars holding up the ceiling, to the designs worked into both the floor and ceiling. At the far side, opposite our stairs, another set of stairs led up to an observation deck where transparent steel made up the walls. Through the viewports, we could see the gas giant, its ring and a bright light heading outbound. Halfway up those stairs, on a broad landing, sat a massive red granite desk, and built into the front of it, a cushioned chair made of that same stone. I found it easy to imagine the governor working at the desk, then moving around forward to sit in judgment over any issues brought before him. Elevated and imperial, he would have ruled as the sole unopposable authority on Sisevvi. Probably pronounced that several different ways. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. All around the room, almost like courtiers waiting for a ruling, odd bits of fine furnishing, casks of credits, Small chests of jewels and stacks of antiquities added a crude but opulent display of conspicuous wealth that smacked of Tavira. Yet all this, which I took in with a glance, faded to insignificance compared to the 6 creatures standing in the open central part of the floor. One, a woman wearing a gray cloak with streaks of matching gray in her long brown hair, stood in the center. A mask hid her face, but unlike the others, it had not been fashioned after an animal, but instead showed a young woman, beautiful and smiling. The fire flashing in the blue eyes behind the mask, however, suggested the tall woman was anything but smiling underneath. Arrayed behind her in an arc, 5 of the Gensarai waited in their gray cloaks, their hoods up. The light flashing down from recessed glow panels above cast long shadows over their masks, but I caught details: reptilian, insectoid, and mammalian. The rightmost figure I had seen on the invidious bridge with Tavira. The others, who were generally smaller, radiated little hints of anxiety. The central figure raised her right arm and pointed a lightsaber toward me. The gold blade shot out, but stopped well shy of crossing the 5 meters that separated us. Finally you have come, the Halcyon, to destroy us. Her eyes focused beyond me. The rest of you are free to go. You have done your part in bringing him here. I frowned. You kidnapped Mirax to get me here? You could have given me directions, and this could have been over much faster. Oral rested a hand on my shoulder. It was not here that was important, but when. The choice of futures is made in the moment the future you desire is born. She let her cloak slip off, revealing her armored form. The armor, like the mask, had been styled after a beautiful woman, and while alluring, was nonetheless deadly. She inclined her head toward me and struck a guard I found hauntingly familiar. She grasped the hilt dagger-like in her left hand, with her right hand riding on the pommel, pointing the blade toward the floor. Now is the time. Luke took a half-step forward and reached my side. Wait, I am Luke Skywalker. There is no need for further violence here. The Skywalker. Your intervention here was not unanticipated. She jerked her head. My students will entertain you, then I will destroy you too, that they may live. The 5 people backing her moved to the left, letting their cloaks fall to the floor. Each brought out a lightsaber and set themselves. Sarai Kar of the Gensarai, do not do this. Luke waved a hand at her students. I do not want to kill them. Then that would be a problem for you, Skywalker. She nodded at me. Come, Halcyon, destroy or be destroyed. There is no alternative at this juncture in time. I lit my lightsaber as she drove toward me and blocked her first sweeping blow low and to the right. I anticipated the wrist twist that allowed her to rake her gold blade back across where I had been. I ducked beneath her cut, then slashed at her legs, but she danced above my blade. What she didn't expect was my remaining low, pivoting on my left hand. As she landed, I swept my legs through her legs, clicking her ankles together and toppling her. I sprang up to press my attack, but she never hit the ground. She turned her fall into a languid backward somersault. The second she touched down, she drove at me again, feinting left and right. I backed away, moving to parry. When her blow finally came in on my left, I caught it on the forte of my blade and brought it up and over in a big circular parry. As I did so, I slid forward so we stood shoulder to shoulder for a second. I cranked my left elbow up into her face mask, driving her back, then batted away a quick slash. Off to my left, Luke moved through the Gensarai with such ease and skill that I realized the only help he needed from me back on Corcus the night we'd faced their brethren was for me to hold his cloak. A quick parry with his lightsaber, and then a push with the Force, and 2 of them went down hard. Another parry and the application of the lightsaber's dark end to a head dropped another to the floor. A telekinetic tug on a mask blinded one, while he fought another to a standstill, their blades arcing and screaming as they met. Sarai Kar came at me with cold fury, her blade held in the style of the Anzadi who slew my grandfather. She aimed a cut across my middle that I danced back from, then she slashed it down toward my trailing leg. The gold blade sliced through my robe and roasted a layer or 2 of skin off the top of my right thigh, but did no serious damage. I pivoted on that foot and arced my left foot around to catch her in the flank, pitching her across the room to where she crashed against a Duraplast chest full of coins. She clawed a handful of them back in my direction, and I realized a second too late what she was really doing. With a telekinetic push, she accelerated them at me. I got my lightsaber up and deflected most of them, but 2 thudded against my chest, and 1 skipped off my forehead, opening up a cut above my right eye. Enough of this. I opened myself fully to the Force and felt it flow through me. I came in at her, beat her blade aside, and planted a front kick against her armored belly. She bounced back a step, but then slashed down and in at me as she quickly advanced. I parried her hard and to the right, then shifted my wrists and came up through a slash that should have cut right through her bracer and taken her left hand off. I felt the jolt run through my lightsaber, numbing my hands as the blade flickered and died. She recoiled, clutching at her smoking armor, her own lightsaber going out as it fell from her hand. Snarling, she nodded sharply at me, and I heard a rustling. One of her students' discarded cloaks wrapped itself around my ankles and dumped me unceremoniously on my back. I blacked out for a second, then saw the Sarai Kar standing over me, her golden blade raised for an overhand blow that would split my head in two. Without conscious thought, I reacted through the Force. Into her brain I projected an image of Nikos Tyrus lying there in my place. She hesitated. Master? Mirax's stun bolt hit the Sarai Kar square in the chest and dropped her out of my sight. I kicked my feet free of the cloak and sat up. Mirax slid down by my side, her blaster carbine still pointed at the armored woman's form. She pumped another shot into her, making the body twitch. Nice shooting. Mirax smiled. Thanks. Tried to shoot her earlier, but wasn't able to concentrate enough to hit her. Then things became clear. Right. At the same time, I broke her concentration by planting a picture in her mind. I linked her fighting style to that of my grandfather's killer, gave her his image, and she hesitated. I rolled up to one knee and kissed Mirax full on the lips. Thanks for the rescue. My pleasure. She stroked a hand through my hair. By the way, you can keep the chin fur, but change the color. Luke came over and knelt next to the Sarai Kar. He worked her mask off, revealing a face somewhat seamed from age and exposure, but clearly it was just an older version of what the mask had shown. Luke touched her forehead and nodded slightly. She'll be fine. What happened to your blade? I don't know. I picked it up and hit the button. The blade sprang to life again with no shock and no sputtering. I felt a lot of feedback. Something in the armor shorted it? Cortosis ore, maybe? Mirax picked up the mask. Spun cortosis fibers in this? Not much of that stuff around, which is fine because it's fairly useless. Still, pretty in ornamentation like this. We have a problem. Eligos looked down at us from the governor's desk. He punched a button, and a hologram appeared above a built-in holoprojector plate on the desk. It resolved itself into a tactical shot of the system around the gas giant. I fed the system data from our ship into the projector here. I show the Invidious leaving the ring, and it's headed this way. I shook my head. Tavira doesn't like losing, and she'll strafe us to get rid of us. Yumfla's done. Suddenly, several more ships appeared in the image, slicing in towards Sevespi, between the Invidious's attack course and the planet. I have ships identified as the Backstab and the Errant Venture entering the system. They are deploying fighters, clutches, and X-Wings. Luke looked at me. X-Wings? Eligos nodded. From the Errant Venture. Invidious is deploying clutches and coming about to engage Errant Venture. They should close to range in 5 minutes. Mirax shook her head. We can't let them do that. Eligos' head came up. Both ships are evenly matched. They are both Imperial-class Star Destroyers. I snarled and stood. Yeah, but Booster's ship doesn't have more than a token array of guns. Can you open up a comm line to the Venture? Mirax, you can talk your father into running. Leaving us here to be lit up by Tavira? Not likely. She shivered. She'll vape the Venture, then vape us. Luke looked at me. Try to call Tavira. Maybe we can make a deal with her. A deal with her? No way. I shook my head. If I know her at all, there's just no way we can convince her. I stopped and bounced the heel of my hand off my forehead. Sith spawn, I'm so stupid. What? I winked at Mirax and ran towards the stairs to the observation deck. Don't worry, I've got it. I'll take care of it. I'll move her right out of here. Move her? The Jedi Master's voice came cool and even. Do you want help? No. Do you need help? Nope. I smiled at him. Remember, size matters not, and telekinesis is not the only way to move the Invidious. I gathered the force inside of me and projected my awareness out into a cone that sought the white dagger stabbing down from the ring. I found it with ease, just teeming with life and fear, anger and arrogance. I worked my way through it until I found a place where arrogance and anger and outrage all seemed to collect. Then I pushed my way into Tavira's mind and flowed into the place where her fears and confidence dwelt. I listened to her weapons officers calling out ranges and preparing firing orders. I pushed a bit of doubt into her mind. It was impossible, wasn't it, that the New Republic would send so small a force after her? Hadn't General said a task force was on its way? He had sounded confident in a time when he should have known no confidence at all. He had worked with us and against us, learning our secrets. He knew how we operated, and he communicated all that to the New Republic. I let her listen to her people a bit more, and latched on to the unease she was feeling with how simple her victory would be. We used the Jedi to hide our ship, but the New Republic, they would make more use of their Jedi. They sent 2 after us on the ground to free the prisoner, but what about their other Jedi? Where are they? What are they doing? Would they dare operate against me without them? In an instant she knew the New Republic saw her as such a threat that they would stop at nothing to catch her, which meant they would use the Jedi against her. Not only that, but they would use the Jedi to trap her by reversing the methods she had used to elude the New Republic. I let her feel that if she sharpened her mind, she could pierce the veil of deception the Jedi were casting over her and her crew. She concentrated and pushed, accomplishing nothing really, but I rewarded her for it. The holographic representation of the errant venture evaporated to be replaced by a bigger ship, a much bigger ship, a superstar destroyer that would eat up her Imstar Deuce as easily as the Invidious had destroyed the Harmjway. I fed to her every image I had burned into my memory of the Lusankya, Isard's old SSD, and channeled it in a good dose of fear. I touched her paranoia, and let one of her own fantasies spin out for her. From the SSD's belly a slender needle-like craft shot. I fed her images of the Sun Crusher, and let her calculate the damage that could be caused by the indestructible fighter-sized craft accelerating to just below light speed, then ramming her ship. It would blow through it from stem to stern in seconds, shattering the Invidious. The SSD would just pound the scraps until their molten metal fragments congealed into debris that would make for a spectacular light show when they burned into Sevesky's atmosphere. "Belay those orders," I heard her shout. "It's a trap! A Jedi trap! Evasive maneuvers! Plot me a course out of here, far away!" I retreated into myself and staggered back against the observation deck railing. From below I heard Elagos. "The Invidious is coming about. Tavira is leaving the system." I turned away slowly, then tried to lean nonchalantly on the railing. Problem solved. Mirax arched an eyebrow at me. "You think so, do you?" I looked down at my wife. "She's gone, isn't she?" "Sure," Mirax smiled, "but my father's going to think she was running from him. He'll be insufferable. You'll never hear the end of how he saved my life, and just happened to include yours in the bargain." "I don't mind," I forced myself to say. After all, a Jedi does not know pain. Chapter 49. Things quieted down on Sevesky fairly quickly after the Invidious ran. We called Booster, and through him got Jacob Niv. Jacob apologized for having brought Booster to us and having given him the data we'd left behind for Kraken, but Booster had been most insistent and had an Imstar Deuce to back things up. Niv contacted Colonel Gert, informed her of what was going on, and offered to consider her and any ex-Invids who stopped their fighting to be members of the survivors for purposes of the deal Luke and I had offered him. Colonel Gert, being the highest-ranking Invid officer in the system, got the ground resistance to back off, and rogue squadrons set down in the palace grounds to hold back any misguided loyalists until Booster could shuttle down some of his security personnel, and Niv could bring down some of the survivor mudbugs to take care of the ground ops. Rogue Squadron had been on a long patrol circuit when Kraken had reached them and pointed them toward Corcus. Though they came from further away, they plotted a tight course that got them to Corcus before Booster. He arrived and offered them a ride to Sevesky, so they shipped aboard. Colonels Kelchu and Gert met on the ground for the first time and were able to work out terms under which the survivors would be allowed to keep their ships. They quickly began to bring local politicians into the meetings, and I had no doubt that within several weeks, Sevesky would petition the New Republic for entry as a full member, complete with a fighter force, and that the survivors would find themselves a nice little home. In addition to that, Elagos indicated that Sevesky struck him as a much nicer world than Karalit. The possibility of moving at least part of the Kamasi remnant to it seemed quite likely. Somehow I thought Kamasi fellowship and guidance for the survivors and the Invids would go a long way toward making Sevesky strong and peaceful. The Gensari still presented us something of a problem, but here too the Kamasi touch provided a solution that could not otherwise have been possible. By the time I'd had my cut treated and things had been calmed down outside, the Gensari Niv had brought with him had been reunited with those Luke had defeated, and the half-dozen who had been stationed on a small base out in the ring to cover the Invidious. They had also been hiding the Pulsar Skate and they had used it to return to Sevespi. The Sarai Kar, when she regained consciousness, seemed truly surprised to be alive. The fact that her students had not been slain and had been allowed to retain custody of their armor and lightsabers clearly confused her. As she sat up on the couch to which she had been carried in the governor's private chambers, she looked at her students, then at Luke, Elagos, and finally me. "Is this how you choose to mock me, Halcyon?" She waved a hand at her students. "You have them here to show me that you have won them over to your murderous ways?" Her orienting on me confused me, since Luke was clearly the master here. I shook my head. "If my ways were the ways of a murderer, why would you be alive? You like to torture us before you slay us. You call yourselves Jedi, but your kind parted from the true Jedi ways a generation ago, and then some. And those who rose up in your place were no better." She lifted her chin, her blue eyes fiery and bright. "We are the true Jedi, the Gen Sarai. You tried before to destroy us, but failed." I frowned. "I've never seen you before. I've never been here before, and I've certainly never tried to harm you or your people before." Just like a Halcyon to deny the evil he has inherited. I looked to Luke. "I'm not tracking here." "Neither am I." Elagos rested hands on our shoulders. "Perhaps you would permit me." I shrugged. "Set a course and go." The Kamasi moved forward and dropped to one knee before the Sarai Kar. "The Gen Sarai are your creation. You fashioned them and their teachings from what you yourself had learned when you trained." Elagos kept his voice low and respectful, probing, but gentle and reassuring. "You are the first Sarai Kar, but you hold dearly to the memories of others, to honor them in their sacrifice." She blinked her eyes a couple of times, then bowed her head. "Yes, this is so." I glanced down as factoids began to slot together for me. When she'd had me at her mercy, I'd projected Tyrus's image from my dream into her brain because I had recognized her fighting style as that of the Anzadi Jedi. I'd done it instinctively and had missed entirely the significance of her saying "master" as she hesitated. She was looking at me, seeing my uniform, my silver blade, and seeing me as my grandfather, or clearly someone who had come to finish what Najah Halcyon had started. Try as I might, though, I searched my memory of the dream and could not place her into it. Elagos pressed her hands together. "These you honor were your teachers and friends. Their deaths you blame on a Halcyon and other Jedi. One very much like me, yes?" An edge returned to her voice. "I do." She thrust a finger at me. "It was a Halcyon who slew my master and my husband that day, and retreated to leave us alone. They did not care for us for the damage they had done. They were supposed to serve all life and living creatures, but they deserted us, proving the lie of the Jedi. We had already known, our masters had told us, that we were a breed apart. The advent of the Jedi here on Sevespi merely proved all they had taught was true." Luke opened his hands. "Truth is often a matter of a point of view." Anger flashed through the Sarai Kar's eyes. "You are not there. You have no point of view." I was about to mention my dream, but Elagos reached out and placed a hand on her knee. "But I do. I would share it with you." She looked sharply at Elagos. "You were not the Jedi there that day." "No, I was not, but I will share with you a secret. I will give you my trust that you may return it. I know you do not want to hurt anyone, which is why I can trust you. I would have you accept my trust, so you can stop yourself from hurting." Luke gave me a sidelong glance, but I nodded reassuringly to him. He knows what he's doing. The Sarai Kar's voice sagged beneath the weight of suspicion. "What will you do?" The Kamasi have a gift in which significant memories become treasured and in special circumstances can be shared. We discovered as a people that we could share them among ourselves, yet with non-Kamasi species they could only be communicated to the Jedi. I think it is their connection to the Force that allows this, and any of us who have come to truly know a Jedi are privileged to be able to share these memni with the Jedi. He twisted back and caught my right hand in his left, dragging me forward. "I have come to know this man under a variety of identities, one of them being Kirin Halcyon, the grandson of Najah Halcyon. Najah is the Halcyon Jedi you accuse of being a murderer, and the Kamasi who was with him that day was my uncle. My uncle passed to me the memnies of what happened here, sharing with me the memory of his friend's death. This is the point of view I have of those events, and I would share it with you in hopes you would understand the other point of view." The Sarai Kar held her hand out to Elagos. "Show me the memory." Elagos stood, but did not relinquish his grip on my hand. "I do not know you well enough for me to transfer the memory to you. I do know Kirin well enough to share with him, and you know he can project it into your mind." You want me to trust a Halcyon too? You ask too much, Kamasi. Eligos looked down at her. Is it too much to ask when it could free you of a burden you have carried for over 40 years? Is it too much to ask when he has not slain you nor your companions, and yet could easily have done so? Bearing in mind, this is the purpose you claim he has come for. Your caution is admirable, but do not let it be a barrier to a greater truth. She hesitated, then nodded once. What I will see, I will consider. Good. Eligos looked at me. Prepare yourself. Am I sending just to her, or do I include Master Skywalker and her apprentices? Luke smiled. I would be honored to share that memory. The Sarai Kar's eyes tightened, then she nodded. Let them see. Okay, I set myself. Ready, I guess. I felt a tingle run through my hand and up into my brain. I touched the Force and entwined it with what I was getting from Eligos, then pushed it out toward the others in the room. I felt contact with all of them, some hot and some oh so cold. I just served as a conduit and watched the memories pour through my mind. Even if I had intended to edit and modify it, I doubt I could have, since what I was seeing came through Kamasi eyes and was wrapped up in Kamasi kinesthetics and senses. Any changes I had made would have been patently human and obviously artificial. Moreover, the intensity and volume of sensory input overwhelmed me. I saw and heard, tasted, touched, and smelled. Boy, did I smell things. So much that I couldn't categorize it. The Memnes was like a holovid presentation, so complex that only by watching it again and again could I begin to grapple with all of the elements. I found myself in Yulnek Ikla's flesh, with his fellow Jedi on either side of him. My grandfather he classified as Spicewood. He knew his name, of course, but the Kamasi's acute sense of smell led him to store identity information with scent being more important than name. The other Jedi he identified as Desert Wind. I heard Desert Wind warn the dark Jedi we faced, and all of our replies the same as in my dream. Then the battle was joined, blades flashing, barking, sparking, and hissing. Moving into combat in the Kamasi's body felt thoroughly alien. His gangling limbs and deceptively slender muscles contained incredible power and grace. His feet shuffled through the dust, always keeping us in balance, with our legs ready to propel me forward in a strike. I watched my foe come in, watched her flick her blade this way and that, probing my defenses. I could tell she had some skill, but how much remained a mystery, and a hint of fear trickled through me as she attacked. Pain exploded on my left flank as the red-haired woman, Dust Rose, raked the tip of her blue lightsaber across my flesh. I caught the stink of burned down, and it almost overrode the pain. I spun away with the impossible quickness, turning a full circle and bringing my red-gold blade around to bat her blade aside. She was good, but I knew I was better. My Kamasi muscles tensed, then brought the blade back up in a rising slash that slipped beneath her guard and opened her from hip to shoulder. Dust Rose reeled back, then flopped to the ground. An explosion of blue energy instantly consumed her body, knocking me back and down. Through the link with the Sarai Kar, I felt a jolt of grief at Dust Rose's death, but it was as nothing as I looked to the left. I saw Spicewood on the ground, his lightsaber beyond his reach. I knew that if I could concentrate, if I could push past the pain, I could move his lightsaber back into his hand. It would only take a moment, and the Anzadi night sweats gloating clearly appeared to give me that moment. Then Spicewood dove for his blade, a night sweat stabbed down. I could almost feel the blade burning its way through my friend, severing the ties his life had to his body. I would have expected him to die instantly, but he managed to smile. The azure blade fixing him to the ground sputtered and died, and in an instant I knew what he had done, how he had employed the rarest of all Jedi gifts, and what a terrible price he had paid for it. Night Sweat rose into the air, then convulsed and seemed to implode. I saw the body fly back through the tents built beneath the Duracrete dome. Night Sweat exploded, as did the dark Jedi Desert Wind had slain. Their mortal bodies no longer able to contain the dark side energy, it flashed out in a blue fireball that shattered the Duracrete dome. I rushed to Spicewood, pulling him clear as the dome began to collapse. I felt Desert Wind supporting the dome around me. Then he let it go as we got clear. I knelt in the dirt, cradling my friend's head in my lap. Desert Wind stood by my side, resting a hand on my shoulder. I think he knew Tyrus was a good enough swordsman to get one or the other of us. Najah knew he could not defeat him with a lightsaber, so he found another means to protect us. I caressed my grandfather's face, wiping away the blood from the cut on his head and the corner of his mouth. To have survived so much to die here, it is sad. But to die in the defense of all that is good, it must be celebrated and remembered. I nodded. It will be a sadder day when such nobility is forgotten. Or feared. Worse yet, yes. I smiled, breathing deep of spicewood scent, then was aware of the lessening of his weight upon my thighs. I looked down and saw him fade away, his burned clothes collapsing, his lightsaber settling into the dust. Beyond his boots, a last section of the dome groaned and sagged in, with a couple of the tiles that had been set into it exploding into fragments. I picked one up and ran my thumb over it, feeling the strange glyphs incised into it. I began to shiver, and Desert Wind supported me. You've been hurt, my friend. We have to get you away from here. In a place of evil like this, there can be no healing. I can make it back to Yumfla. Good, and then to Corellia. Desert Wind helped me up. Najah's family will know he died a hero. The memory faded out as my vision of the room flooded back. I tasted salt on my lips. I reached up and swiped away at tears. I turned to thank Elagos, but could not speak past the tightness in my throat. Elagos nodded. I know. The Sarai Kar began speaking in a small voice. I know well the pain of lost comrades your uncle felt, Kamasi. I mourn for him, but his belief that he and his friends were right in no way means they were. When that dome collapsed, my husband was crushed. We lost a half-dozen friends, and I was left alone with 3 other apprentices. She pressed her hand against her stomach. And the boy growing in my belly. We hid from the Jedi and mourned and buried our dead. We had been sealed together, bound together by the deaths. We made a new beginning from the tragedy, and yet this memory would seek to have us believe we were walking the path of evil. I nodded my head. The memory proves it. The writings on the tiles, I recognize it from Yavin 4. It's of Sith origin. The Sarai Kar nodded. Our masters had uncovered information about Sith techniques from an antiquarian who recovered artifacts. They learned that the Jedi had stolen their discipline from the Sith, had perverted Sith teaching, and our masters were returning us to the true way. Gen Sarai is a Sith word for the hidden followers of truth. As the Sarai Kar, I am the keeper of that truth. We are not evil. Luke shook his head. In fact, you are not. I frowned at him. They were following Sith practices. Are you forgetting Exar Kun and all that? Not at all, Kieran. They were being taught the Jedi way by people who had accepted Sith thoughts and philosophies, but they themselves were not sufficiently developed to be initiated into them. Their masters had not yet found the hooks by which they could be open to the dark side. And then, after the deaths of their masters, they continued learning, but did so with the orientation of protecting themselves from the Jedi. They dedicated themselves to defense, choosing the correct path for the wrong reasons. I shivered, but with such a hate for the Jedi, they should have come forth and helped the Emperor hunt them down. The Sarai Kar leaned forward, covering her face in her hands. Again, we were betrayed. As she sobbed, one of the apprentices, Red, removed her mask. The Sarai Kar's son was of an age to be independent when the Emperor started hunting down the Jedi. Against her wishes, he left here and offered his services to Darth Vader. He was slain outright, and Jedi hunters came here but never found us. I was but a child then, but I remember the hiding, the fear. Our community kept us strong. I nodded, and when the rebellion started, you could not join it because it lauded as heroes the very Jedi who had created you in the first place. Sarai Kar looked up, wiping away her tears. We are not evil. Luke dropped to one knee before her. No, the Gen Sarai are not, nor are they wholly good. What? Her face sharpened. How can you say that? It is a simple truth, of which you have part, but you stand so close to it that you cannot see the whole of it. You are fully committed to your community, to your students, and they to you and each other. This is what kept you from the dark side. Even when your people helped Tavira, they did so to protect you and Sevespi. This is good, but is not the true whole of the Jedi tradition. Luke gave her a heartwarming smile. To be a Jedi is to be committed to the defense of everyone. Our duties do have limits. Najah Halcyon limited his work to the Corellian system, except when extraordinary circumstances called him beyond it. When he did come forth, he was willing to sacrifice his life for others. Here, you have not been open to those calls, those sacrifices. and this has limited your access to the Force and all it offers. I have an academy that could teach you, or some of your apprentices, about this grander Jedi tradition, if you wish. It is an offer I shall consider, she shivered. Could I have been wrong all these years? I smiled at her. Not wrong, not at all. You did what you felt was right to save others from being hurt. That is never wrong. My Jedi Master rose. It is very right. We can just make it more so. Kirin, he is the product of one Jedi tradition, and me, I am born of yet a different one. You and your Gen Sarai are just part of a third. If you will permit it, we would welcome you into the greater Jedi tradition of service, so that all of our ways, woven together, will make us so strong we can never again be torn apart. Epilogue. The next time I saw Luke was about 3 days later. I met him in the governor's palace, not quite by chance. I'd been going to see him, but felt him speaking to the Sarai car, so I headed up to the roof and the shuttle pad. I was looking out over Yumfla's night sky and up at the brilliant curved planetary ring stretching up and out from the horizon. Beyond the ring the stars looked so bright and so inviting, and the space between them so black and cold. There you are, Corrin. Luke smiled as he came up onto the roof. Your wife's right. Brown is better for your hair. I raked my fingers back through it. Yeah, gonna let it grow out a bit, too. Can't decide on the goatee and mustache, though. I'd get rid of it. Luke shrugged and joined me at the wall. I had been hoping to see you over the past couple of days. Sorry, Mirax and I were checking out the Pulsar skate and making sure it was prepped for the trip back to Coruscant. I pointed vaguely off toward the starport. We can give you a ride back if you want. No, you'll want time alone, or more time alone. And Eligos has learned of the Alderaanian ritual of leaving grave goods in the graveyard. Orl and I are going to head to Carolit, pick up Eligos' daughter, Rileki, and take them to where they can find things for Yelnik Itkla. Where they can leave things for Yelnik Itkla. I nodded. I'll have to make that trip too at some point, leave something for Yelnik in my grandfather's name. I think that would please both of them. The Jedi Master glanced up at the stars. After that, I think I'd like to help Rogue Squadron find the Invidious and end Tavira's career. I shrugged. Without the Gen Sarai, she'll just be another proto-warlord running around out there. Someone will get her. New Republic, probably. Maybe she'll anger Peli-Aeon, and he'll do us a favor by taking her toy away from her. I don't know who that is. That would be convenient, certainly. Luke fell silent for a moment, then rested his hands on the top of the restraining wall. There's something important I need to discuss with you. Me too, I gave him a smile. I'd spent a fair amount of time thinking about my life and my father's man-in-the-mirror saying. I actually did recognize myself, which was good, but it forced some hard choices. I shrugged. I'm not going to go back to the academy. I'm not going to be a Jedi full-time. Interesting. I arched an eyebrow at him. Interesting? Yes, I was going to ask you not to return to the academy. My mouth gaped open in shock for a second. I wasn't that disruptive, was I? The Jedi Master shook his head. Not at all. You see, you had training all your life that directed you toward a goal that I'm trying to train my recruits for. You have a grounding that means learning to use the Jedi techniques and tools just adds another layer to you. It provides you with more things to do. Things you already are well trained to do. On the way here, you pointed out that the Jah often went about as a regular man, solving problems and only using his Jedi abilities when needed, precisely because he had the other skills needed to do those jobs and didn't have to rely upon his Jedi skills. I smiled as I unraveled what he meant. When the only tool you have is a hydro spanner, every problem looks like something that needs to be torqued. I think I get what you're saying. I'd expect that of a detective. Luke laughed lightly. You figured out Exar Kun had to be behind Gantoris' death and the trouble on Yavin 4 because you were a trained investigator. I missed all the evidence you saw or didn't want to believe it because I didn't see how it fit together. That fitting together training is some of what the new Jedi will need. The regimen that gets created to provide it won't give you anything. You could well be right. He folded his arms across his chest. So why is it that you won't be coming back? I shifted my shoulders uneasily. It kind of gets back to what you said about Najah, and to part of what I did to Tavira to get her out of here. The place where I can do the greatest good right now, I think, is with Rogue Squadron. Look at you, you're always being called away to solve some galaxy-threatening problem, having to leave the Academy in someone else's hands when training more Jedi is what you'd most like to be doing. By remaining core and horn and staying with Rogue Squadron, I can use my abilities where they will be critical for missions, and yet I won't be pulled in all sorts of different directions. And you will be able to remain on Coruscant and start a family. Among other things, I smiled, recalling fondly how much checking out and how little real work Max and I had got done on the skate. Part of what frightened Tavira off was the fact that she didn't believe the Sun Crusher had been destroyed. The fact that she knew it was out there but couldn't find it had her convinced it was hunting her. I guess by staying hidden, I'll be a surprise waiting for anyone who needs one. So Kieran Halcyon dies here? Not dies, just fades away. Few enough people know I'm him that keeping it a secret shouldn't really be difficult. I reached out and rested my right hand on Luke's shoulder. You need Kieran for anything, he'll be there. You need Corn Horn for anything, he'll be there. Fact of the matter is, without you I'd be dead, Mirax would still be imprisoned, and Tavira would be raiding away. Luke smiled, and without you, I'd be on a slab in a temple on Yavin 4. We're even. No harm came to my niece and nephew during that time, so I may even owe you. I was hoping you'd say that. I gave him a big smile. There's one more thing I want to do to wrap this whole thing up, with your permission. Luke nodded. Name it. I did. I leveled the X-Wing out at what Whistler reported to be 19.52 meters above the Yavin 4 landscape and hovered there, eyeball to eyeball, with Exar Kun's statue. It actually stood a good 500 meters off the X-Wing's nose, but those hollow black eyes watched me intensely. I gave him a big smile. Whistler, you got all sensors on full record, and you're feeding the data back to the skate at the Great Temple? His curt blap reminded me that he didn't forget orders, or go gallivanting off around the galaxy, leaving friends behind to be worried circuit worn about him. I nodded. We are good to go and clear to fire. I flicked the weapons control over to proton torpedoes and set it for single fire. I dropped my targeting reticule over Exar Kun's face, then cut my comm unit feed. I didn't mind folks watching what I was doing, but what I had to say, that was just for me and Exar Kun. I know you're gone, but I also know you plan for that someday. This temple might be an archaeological find of great value, a monument of untold wonder, but it's also a monument to evil. You used it to infect Kip, and mere impressions made of the glyphs infected the Dark Jedi who killed my grandfather. Your evil created the Gen Sarai, and even though they rose above it, people have still suffered and died because of it. But this isn't revenge, which you would have liked. Nope, this is simply a precaution. I settled my finger on the trigger. Wouldn't leave a lightsaber around where a kid could find it. And this temple to you is 1,000,000 more times dangerous than that. I pulled the trigger and sent a proton torpedo streaking out at the statue. The warhead detonated when it hit the bridge of his nose, shattering his skull into thousands of fragments that sprayed out in a shower of sparks and cloud of whitish smoke. The bits and pieces of Exar Kun's head rained down in a narrow triangle, smashing the lake's mirror-like surface, forever breaking up the last intact images of that island. 2 more proton torpedoes took Exar Kun off at waist and knees, then I shot the rest of them into the base of the obelisk on which he had stood. It toppled wonderfully, breaking into pieces as it went. The chunks slammed into the ground and crushed walls, then bounced around inside the temple, pulverizing slab after slab of Sith writings. Some eventually ricocheted high enough to escape the temple itself, splashing down in the cold, dark lake. Switching to lasers, I raked fire back and forth across the temple, heating rock until it ran like water. Great clouds of steam rose up as stones sloughed off walls and sank, formless and unshaped and now unblemished by Sith scribings. When I was done, only the island itself remained, still black as night, but now all soft and curving, no longer angular, no longer strong, no longer a place of power, just a tranquil spot in a lake that would once again reflect the stars, and now could reflect their peace. I flipped my comm unit back on. This is Rogue 9, mission accomplished. Mirax's voice filled my helmet. We got that, Rogue 9. Master Skywalker says, well done. Thank him for me, it was my pleasure. I smiled. Exar Kun is done. The Invids have fled, this temple is gone, and you're home again. Only one last bit of business, and all of this can be over. And that is? And that is the toughest bit of all, my love, I laughed. We have to tell your father our first child will not be named for him. The end. What are they going to name their first child? Luke? That is the end of I, Jedi by Michael A. Stackpole. What a great book. A very satisfying ending. I like how the things that they set up, paid off with the Kamasi and the ability to transfer the memories, and the relationship to the grandfather and all that. And he even got his revenge on Exar Kun. Maybe he'll put up his bachelor pad with his, big screen TV on the property like he told Exar Kun that he was going to. That's it. I got nothing else. I guess thanks to Michael A. Stackpole for writing this, and thanks to DK for reading the first part of it. And that's it. That's the end. Go back and read some more books or watch the original trilogy again.